Hidden beneath the surface of our world exists a universe most humans never see. To us, it is barely more than a tiny creature beneath a handful of grain. But the creature we call a mealworm is not actually a worm at all. It is the larval stage of a beetle, a young creature destined to transform completely. And beneath the surface, thousands of these tiny lives may exist together. Every movement has a purpose. Every shadow may hide danger. Because for a creature this small, survival is a constant battle. So what is life really like inside this hidden world? To discover the answer, we must shrink ourselves down. Because when viewed from their perspective, a handful of grain becomes an entire landscape. At the front of this tiny body is a surprisingly complex world. Sensitive structures help it explore its surroundings and respond to the environment. 6 tiny legs near the front of its body provide the grip needed to navigate this miniature world. The rest of the body is made of flexible segments, allowing the larva to squeeze through narrow spaces. Every contraction, every turn, and every movement is part of a remarkable survival system. Like all living creatures, it must constantly solve one essential problem: finding enough food. Grains provide energy, while moisture can come from carefully selected plant material. In their dry environment, even a tiny amount of moisture can become precious. But too much moisture can transform their world into a dangerous place. For these tiny creatures, survival depends on balance. A mealworm rarely exists in complete isolation. Together, they create a constantly shifting community of tiny bodies. There are no loud battles here. Competition happens silently. Each larva searches for food, moisture, and a safe place to continue growing. Beneath the surface, their movements create a maze of temporary tunnels. In seconds, a creature can vanish from sight. Yet beneath us, life continues. Sometimes, survival means knowing when not to move. Because danger can arrive without warning. Instinct takes over, sending them deeper into darkness. Temperature can change everything. In colder conditions, their movements slow. In excessive heat, the search for shelter becomes urgent. Because danger can arrive without warning. But even in a healthy environment, food is never guaranteed. Then, suddenly, a scent leads it toward a potential meal. For a creature this small, every meal matters. With every meal, the larva grows closer to the most important transformation of its life. But growth comes with a price. To become larger, it must leave its old body behind. For a short time, the new body is vulnerable. So the larva disappears from view. Days pass. The body hardens. The larva returns to its endless search for food. And then, eventually, the cycle begins again. Again and again, the larva sheds its old skin and becomes something new. Until one day, the larva reaches the final stage of its childhood. And then, something extraordinary begins. The creature that spent its life crawling and feeding suddenly becomes still. It has reached the threshold between one life and another. Inside the darkness, the next chapter of its secret life is about to begin. From the outside, almost nothing seems to be happening. The pupa does not search for food. It does not burrow. It simply waits. But beneath that seemingly lifeless surface, an extraordinary transformation is taking place. The larval body is being reorganized into an entirely different form. New legs develop. Antennae take shape. Wings begin their hidden journey. The crawling larva is slowly becoming something that can walk, climb, and reproduce. And all the while, the outside world continues without it. Hours become days. The transformation reaches its final stages. Then, slowly, the first sign of change appears. The developing beetle begins to reveal itself through the changing color of its body. The transformation is nearly complete. The wait is almost over. After days of stillness, movement finally returns. The creature that emerges is no longer a mealworm. At first, the adult beetle is surprisingly pale and vulnerable. Slowly, its body hardens and its color deepens. The crawling larva has become a fully formed adult beetle. Everything about its body has changed fundamentally. The soft larval body has been replaced by a protective, armored exterior. Now, its antennae become essential tools for exploring a new world. For the first time, it begins to explore the world as an adult. The world that once surrounded the larva now looks completely different. And now begins a new mission, finding food, shelter, and a mate. Even as an adult, darkness remains its ultimate refuge. Like many small creatures, the beetle becomes most active in the quiet night. Under cover of darkness, the hidden community comes alive. And eventually, the cycle begins for the next generation. Somewhere beneath the surface, new life is already waiting. Almost invisible to the eye, the next generation begins its journey. From a tiny egg, another larva emerges into the world. Small, vulnerable, almost impossible for a human to notice. But immediately, the ancient instinct to survive takes over. Another life begins where countless others have lived before. Larvae, pupae, and beetles all exist within the same world. One generation eventually fades into the darkness of the soil, while another is only beginning its long crawl. Egg, larva, pupa, beetle, then the egg once again. A simple cycle, repeated across countless generations of insects. The greatest secret of their survival is not strength. The secret is their incredible ability to adapt. But the world of the mealworm does not exist alone. For centuries, humans have largely overlooked these tiny creatures. Today, however, scientists are beginning to look at them differently. A creature once considered insignificant may have a vital role. They have become a vital food source for many animals. Their nutritional value makes them essential in modern research. Entire farms now exist to raise millions of these insects. What appears to be simple is actually a complex ecosystem. Could these tiny creatures become even more important soon? The more we look, the more secrets we discover. But the story of the mealworm is much bigger than its own survival. Every day, these tiny creatures perform work that is almost invisible to us. They consume organic materials and help transform the environment around them. In the miniature world of decomposition, small creatures can have surprisingly large effects. Nothing in nature truly disappears. It changes its form entirely over time. And creatures like mealworms become part of that endless cycle of life. To the human eye, it may look like nothing more than a handful of grain. But at the right scale, it becomes an entire and complex universe. In this deep underground landscape, the rules are fundamentally different. One grain becomes a hill. One tiny crack becomes a dark tunnel. Life in this miniature world is never guaranteed for any creature. When danger appears, the safest place may be beneath the surface bedding. For a creature built for hidden spaces, Darkness is not an enemy. Instead, it is a form of vital and constant protection. When conditions change, the entire colony responds to the shifting world. Sometimes the answer to survival is simple: go much deeper. And when the immediate danger passes, they return to the surface. Survival is a constant and necessary search for perfect balance. For a tiny body, every single movement requires precious energy. Every decision is part of an invisible and vital economy of energy. Unlike humans, a mealworm has no internal skeleton like ours. Instead, its body is supported and protected by a hard external structure. Segment by segment, this structure provides both protection and extreme flexibility. But armor has one major problem: it cannot grow with the animal. So the mealworm must eventually leave its old body behind. One life phase ends, and a new one begins immediately. For a brief moment, the creature is softer and more vulnerable. Patience becomes its greatest and most important defense right now. Slowly, the new outer layer hardens into a strong shell. And the cycle of growth begins again for the larva. The mealworm spends most of its life in this form. Every day is preparation for a transformation it cannot see. How? Eventually, the constant feeding begins to slow down significantly. The final journey as a larva has now officially begun. It searches for a quiet and safe place to rest. And there, in the silence, it finally stops moving. For the first time, the creature does not seek food. The larva has entered the next stage of its life. It now exists between two very different identities. To the outside world, it may look completely lifeless. But to scientists, the mealworm is a fascinating subject of study. Researchers study how these insects grow and adapt to change. Their predictable life cycle makes them valuable for biological research. Small organisms help scientists answer surprisingly large global questions. Could these insects become part of the future of food? Mealworms can be raised efficiently in very compact spaces. This is farming on a scale most rarely imagine. Millions of tiny lives growing together in managed environments. From a hidden creature to an insect with global potential. The mystery is not what it is, but what else we discover.
you.